Is that your husband? He is English. Of the millions of Egyptians in the world today, you opted to marry an Englishman. The Syrian passport control officer glared at me after I crossed the once peaceful Lebanese-Syrian border 17 years ago. He shook his head, and interrogated me with a fusillade of awkward questions after I had submitted my passport. Yes, I did marry a blonde Englishman, I said, looking the officer straight in the eye. Not only that, but we are also planning to travel around the Middle East together. Honor proving eventually, Bashar al-Assad's perplexed official allowed us to enter the country. Little did I realize it was only the beginning of a relentless journey of honor proving, a struggle to prove my Islamic bona fides whenever and wherever I traveled. And through it all, one thing eventually became clear: my Islamic marriage certificate was more important than my passport. I repeatedly questioned why Muslim societies are happy to accept the men marrying non-Muslims, but firmly deny the women the same right. 2 weeks ago, Tunisia became the only country in the Arab world to officially allow Muslim women to marry non-Muslim men, a decision that has sparked outrage in my native country, Egypt, and triggered fresh memories of my own ordeals as an outsider who dared cross the cultural divide and marry a Westerner. The author at the time of her travels: in the early days of my relationship, I assumed that the only challenge would be from my mother, my only close relative. I was wrong. The challenges extended far beyond the immediate family. Indeed, although my mother strongly opposed the marriage, she later mellowed and respected my wish after my husband went to Egypt, converted to Islam, and formally proposed to me. Although my ex-husband formally converted in Al-Azhar, he did not take a Muslim name. That was enough to render his faith as questionable. Shortly before midnight, after touring Damascus, we were interrupted in our hostel room by a rude wake-up call, literally. An aggressive voice at the door said, "We are the night staff. We need to check your marriage certificate." Although we had shown the precious certificate to the afternoon staff earlier, the night staffs were not convinced. They wanted to check it one more time, at around midnight. "This is a Muslim country, and you claim to be Muslim," one of them said. The 2 hostel staff looked bemused and offended when I responded angrily, "Yes, I am Muslim, and I have the right to choose my husband." Even in my native country, Egypt, officials, hotel employees, and others we met on tour questioned his Islamic credential. We had, however, a particularly challenging encounter at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. To enter the Dome of the Rock, my ex-husband was asked to perform ablutions, the ritual of washing before prayers, apparently to prove he was not a Jew. According to one of the guards, this was a necessary ritual because Jews occasionally want to break into the sacred site. Double standards on Muslim marriage in England. The challenges and grilling continued. One night was particularly distressing when a well-educated, senior medical colleague of mine, a doctor, volunteered to educate me about how God would punish me if my husband stopped performing his Islamic duties. This colleague then said, with no small degree of condescension, "I know a girl who made your stupid mistake. She was eventually punished by God, who cursed her with a rare skin disease." I repeatedly questioned why Muslim societies are happy to accept the men marrying non-Muslims, but firmly deny the women the same right. This social dualism, in my view, is not triggered just by the literal interpretation of Quranic verses per se, but has its roots in the Muslim world's medieval evolution. Muslim armies conquered what is commonly referred to as the Christian Middle East with relative speed. Those easy conquests resulted in the importation of Christian women as slaves into the lands of the Muslim conquerors. The opposite scenario, however, was rare. Very few Muslim women ended up as slaves in Christian countries. Muslim leaders always tried hard to avoid such a nightmarish scenario, which considered capture by Christians as a disgraceful loss of honor. The impact of those medieval religious wars is still ingrained in the Muslim psyche. In societies where the past reigns over the present, words such as honor are taken literally. Most Muslim scholars are still living with this medieval mindset, despite the fact that modern-day conflicts are essentially political, not religious. They base their edicts on the basis that non-Muslims do not acknowledge or respect Islam, which is not necessarily true in our post-modern world. In such a sexually free world, a deep love and respect is the only motivating factor behind a non-Muslim man's desire to marry a pious Muslim woman. Those men usually respect Islam, and have no intention of changing the partner's faith. Respecting women's choice. My marriage eventually fell apart for reasons unrelated to faith, but it opened my eyes to the need to respect Muslim women's choice in marriage, even to non-Muslims. Bureaucratizing Islam by suggesting such solutions as let him convert on paper is not just hypocritical, it does not work in reality. Imposing a straitjacket of cultural and religious conformity on a marriage by laying down such conditions is indeed the work of overzealous bureaucrats who often embrace misogyny to prove the sincerity of the faith. When modern Muslim women choose a non-Muslim for a marriage partner, they are not abandoning the faith, rather, they are integrating the faith into a broader family bond that respects and cherishes Islam. Such relationships could help build bridges between communities in our tense, polarized societies, and temper the tidal wave of suspicion and hatred that is often a byproduct of intolerance and misunderstanding. @Nirvana_1